Wow, glad to meet you, Joseph.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's good to put a face to a name, and so
Yeah.
the name that we used to know, now we have seen the person.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay,
Boy.
so Your Excellency, if you are destined to be the leader of this nation, which I actually believe,
Thank you.
What would you say? What would you say was your biggest wake-up call in deciding to run for this office?
I struggled with God when it became clear to me that I was hearing Him tell me to not just restrict my ministry to the pulpit, but to go out to the public. And the public square is not a place where preachers are encouraged to participate in. Now they can say, oh, yeah, encourage believers to do that. But when a preacher does that, it's like he's not thinking straight. They have lost their calling. And sure enough, I was called all manner of names. But if I hadn't believed what I heard God say to me, I wouldn't be here today. But it has taken a confluence of events and people and organizations, including elections, to make it happen. Only God could do that.
How does your ministry just end with you being here, or is this a continuation? If it is, because you said it before, explain to us how you were able to merge these things.
The first time that I ran the highest office, I remember when we were doing a campaign, a news reporter asked me in Blantyre, if you don't make it as president, are you going to go back to ministry? So I said, sir, you misunderstand. For me, this is ministry. I didn't leave ministry. I never left ministry. And people may perceive it that way, but for me, this is as much a calling as when I was preaching behind the pulpit. So I say this to you, and I'm saying, I cannot change who I am. When we used to sing that I will go wherever you lead me, we never knew that some of those steps the Lord would lead us through Parliament. Here's a state presidency. However, I need to remain who I am, maintain the perspective that this is about service. It's not about me. It is about the one who called me to serve. I've been able to still preach whenever I've been invited. I serve on the World Assemblies of God Fellowship Council. Used to be secretary, but I haven't been preaching as much. And so I need to concentrate on running the affairs of state and follow what our Constitution demands of me. But I'm still a preacher. I use my 5 fingers and say, this is a high five, a super high five. And we're talking about servant leadership. Let's change our thinking and our conversation about leadership. Is it the big man or the servant? And so we want to talk more about servant leadership, about service, about providing your best for the people, not expecting the people to do your service. And then we're talking about unifying the country. We get divided over small issues like tribes or even region of origin or even religion sometimes. And we says, no, we are one country. We must remain united because when we are united behind one common vision that everybody has buy-in, then we are able to do much more. You know, the kind of synergy that says 2 is better than 1. Or if 1 chases 1,000, 2 will chase 10,000. And so you have that exponential type of synergy that we can create. And so we emphasize unity. We emphasize the fact that we need to prosper together. Abject poverty makes me mad. And so we don't even want to talk about poverty reduction. We want to talk about wealth creation. How can we all prosper together? Malawi having so many good resources. Wonderful. You can't even find some of the things you find in Malawi anywhere on the continent or anywhere on the planet. We have a wonderful lake with fish species, tropical fish that you can't find anywhere on planet Earth. We have beautiful valleys. We have wonderful mountains. Why would we remain poor? We are an agricultural country. We can actually produce food and add value to that and export it while we have plenty. Even if it wouldn't rain, we would have plenty for 5 years. About a third of our revenue gets stolen, gets abused, and gets into wrong places. We can run our own affairs, but we fail to do that because of too much corruption. And it is like it's accepted way of life. And it says no to this. We must end it. And finally, we said the fifth pillar is let's follow the rule of law. Let us encourage our institutions. Let us follow what the law says. Now, that becomes a problem because sometimes you want to move faster, then you get ahead of the law, or you're moving too slow. What you need to do is be in sync with what the law says, and if you don't like what the law currently says, change it to serve the people, because the law is supposed to serve people. So with those, I believe that at the end of 5 years, then people should judge us. Have we been able to do this or not?
There's something that stands out for me as I've traveled around Malawi, because I've been here for a short while. Now, I'm going to ask you, how did you guys get to a point where your military has become like a major pillar of democracy in Malawi, like no military that I've seen anywhere on the continent of Africa?
The military have become a people's military, and the reason is simple. Those leaders of the military stood with the constitutional mandate they have. In fact, they began to demonstrate this after a president died in office. And there were maneuverings to do stuff that was unconstitutional. And the military stood their ground. We're not taking over the government. We will make sure that constitutional order is respected. And so during these times when people said the elections have not gone right, and I had said, I'm challenging this, but we're taking it to court. We were harassed, we were tear gassed, we were, all manner of things happened. But the military stood with the people and said, let the people demonstrate it's their constitutional right and let them be protected.
2012, when President Bingwa Mutharika died, the people who were in the party, the ruling party at the time, wanted to make sure that the vice president, who was Joyce Banda at the time, didn't become president. And therefore, they wanted to solicit the assistance of the military. And they refused. They said, no. The Constitution of the Republic of Malawi says that when the president dies, the vice president becomes the president. That's it. There's no two ways about it. That's how Joyce Banda became the president, because the military decided no. In 2014, although there were allegations of fraud in the elections, the military says we are waiting for what the Electoral Commission is going to say. If they say it's this one, it's this one. That's it. And so in 2019, 2020, when the ruling party at the time was trying to abuse people who were expressing themselves that they were dissatisfied with the elections, and the police were being involved, were being ordered to harass the people, it is the military that came and said, no, you can't do that, because the Constitution of the Republic says the people are free to demonstrate. And so anywhere where there was a threat of people being harassed, the military came in to just make sure that the people were marching, were demonstrating peacefully, and were not being harassed. And that's how it went for a whole year of demonstrations. The military made sure that there was nobody harassing the people who were expressing their free will. And that's how we are here.
They know what powers they have. It's not to take orders from me, for example, as commander-in-chief, and give orders that would put them in trouble with the International Criminal Court, for example, if they go around killing people. And so, because they chose that pathway, they have become truly the people's military.
You talked about 100 days in office, except if you're not an African. If you're African, you know how that people are so conscious of 100 days in office. You know, after 100 days, everybody wants to see, oh, they have done everything. They don't know that sometimes these things take a lot of planning and foundation building and stuff. So what I'm going to ask you now is, what foundations have you laid with respect to all the radical socioeconomic change that you want people to see in Malawi during your term in office?
You know, we would truly like to have done everything in 3 months, but we have laid certain foundational things and put them in place so that even through the budget that is being debated and will be passed hopefully this week, we create an environment in which governance institutions are given sufficient resources, and that the socioeconomic context is also conducive to creating wealth by making sure that the budget will resuscitate an economy that is on a deathbed. In order for us to do what we promise the people, for example, have more food produced by making sure that farm inputs are available across the country at an affordable price. That has been put in place. I'll be launching that pretty soon so that we can have food sufficiency. But we have also laid the foundation for partnerships with investors within as well as those coming from the outside so they can partner together in ways that will make it possible for true creation of jobs. We have re-engineered certain agencies of government. For example, the fund that would be loaned to people to their businesses. Now we are calling it the National Economic Empowerment Fund so that various groups and cooperatives and individuals can benefit from financing. You know, some of that is not even seen anywhere because, like you've come here, you haven't seen the foundation of this building. Usually, foundational issues are not as evident out there. And of course, when people criticize you and says there's nothing you've done, you take that and you say, I understand, because the expectation is that you should have done everything. We learn from that and we say, we are laying a foundation. And even this year, whenever we finish the year, God willing, of our administration, certain things that people couldn't see in 3 months, they will be able to see.
Your Excellency, I have to be deeply honest with you. This country is magically beautiful. Now, you will not believe how many places I've been to in just a few weeks. I've been to Chenteche, I've been to Rwanda Park, I've been to Salima, I've been to so many places. And every step of the way, I kept saying to myself, why isn't the whole world in Malawi? Now, you have 5 national parks. I visited just one. And saw hippos for the first time in my life. And then there are game reserves and there are all these things. And your lake is one of the most magical things I've ever seen in my life. So with your emergence now as the president, I kind of have a very positive view of how things are going to look. I feel like many people are going to start coming to Malawi. Now, my question is, what are you doing to make it very easy for tourists to pour into Malawi? Because I know that this will become a major income earner.
Well, thank you so much, Joseph. We have been laying the foundation for truly selling Malawi to the world. Malawi is the best kept secret. You know, even a couple of years ago, several years ago, there was an advert on CNN says if you want the 10 most beautiful places to visit in Africa, 2 of those were in Malawi. They talked about the Nyika Plateau up north. They talked about the lake. We want to make the lake towns cities, and we want to build airport in Mangochi and have Cape Maclear become a city. That we want to start from way up north in Karonga, go down that lake. I've been traveling to visit my neighbors in Mozambique. I was in Tanzania last week, and Zambia and Zimbabwe. And what some of the things we're talking about is, when tourists come, if they come to visit Kilimanjaro, then we can have them come visit Malawi without having to do another trip. If they come visit Malawi, they can go to Zambia and see, real Africa there. Let them go to Mozambique and to TED and to visit some places wonderful. So if we can work together regionally and we also market Malawi in such a way that it becomes a preferred destination for tourists, we want to cut out the red tape so that visas will become easier to come by, and that we would encourage those, even from South Africa. South Africa is our biggest trading partner, and most of the tourists that have come to Malawi in the past have come from South Africa. We want to make sure that we have more. So we want to encourage everybody. We want to be able to say, Malawi is ready for you. Please come. We call this the warm heart of Africa.
Malawi is known to produce a lot of history. Malawi produced one of the few female presidents in Africa, Dr. Joyce Banda.
That's right.
What is your relationship with Dr. Banda, and what would you say about the legacy she has left in Malawi?
This country, like you put it, has become one of the fewest on the continent to have produced a female president. And it was through constitutional order, like I made reference to in the beginning, because she was vice president of the country. And so when a president died in office, she became president. But she was such a president that was able to handle Malawi currency situation, which had become a problem at that time, and she realized that, and then we were able to have fuel because we had too many lines across the country looking for fuel. Sometimes people stayed for days because there was no fuel. She made sure that was resolved. There was plenty of blackouts and no electricity. She was able to make sure that was quickly dealt with. Her administration faced huge problems that had begun to actually be felt before she even became president. And the president that died in office had already acknowledged some of that problem. And so that came to a head during her presidency. But she remained a grassroots person.
Even when she was president, she would go deep into the remotest village and sit on the floor with some very old poor lady and just bring a smile to those people.
She remains someone who is committed to rural transformation and development. She remains someone who is committed to elevating the place of women in society and across the continent. She still is an ambassador for such, and she continues to have her influence spread. She's become a great friend. One time, in fact, in 2019, she wanted to run for president again. And after presenting her papers, and we continued to talk, we had talked before and we talked after, she was convinced that she should pull out and support my presidency, which she did.
A month after presenting papers, that he came and followed me to Damas at night and said, I'm back. I truly believe God is telling me we have to work together. And the things that he told me that night, my husband and I decided, yeah, I could step aside. It was okay. I could step aside and support him.
She is someone that, like I would want to learn from the other presidents, someone that I talk with constantly, and because she has demonstrated a level of faith in me and her readiness to help wherever she needs to help, that I say this is the way things ought to be.
Our elections have just been nullified, and we've just had a rerun and removed the president after he was in office for 1 year. It is that same president who took over from me.
How was this possible in Malawi? Because in my country, I don't think that would ever have happened. Like, this person was just 1 year in office and you guys were able to mobilize forces. How did this happen, and what lesson do you think there is there for all the countries in this very continent?
You know, as a believer, I say it was God. And so what had happened in the 2019 election, which was characterized by so many irregularities and so many illegalities. In fact, at that time, it was popular now to call his re-election as a TPEX election.
TPEX, the correcting fluid, was used in 2014 as well. An observer said in 2014, we must never call what we saw in Malawi an election.
You could see where they had used all of that in so many of the papers on which results were computed. And so we went to court, we presented our case, and the judges determined that the case was genuine, and so they nullified that election and called for a fresh one. They were not satisfied, they appealed to the Supreme Court.
Having won the court case, Peter Mutharika went and appealed. The country started screaming now, you two get together. Get together. This coalition and the UTM, get together. That's the only way you are going to remove this man.
The Supreme Court upheld that judgment of the High Court, and which had sat as a constitutional court, and said the election need to take place. So we didn't have any choice. The courts remained independent and corrupt-free, because there had been attempts that were everywhere. People talked about those attempts to bribe them. While they had been threatened, they stayed the course. The demonstrations and the military, like we talked about, they were taking place at that same time. We spent most of that year in court, sitting on hard benches and listening and giving testimony. I was even there. I'd never been in court and questioned, cross-examined, that's what they call it. Dr. Saulus Klaus Chilima, our vice president, and I had joined forces to challenge that election.
Malawians were tired of the old regime. They wanted them to go. The people said, we need unity between the two so that this one goes. But there needed to be a voice of reason, a tender person to bring them together. And that's what she played.
I have a very special gift that God has given me, I think, as a mother. And then my age also helps me. I was privileged to have access to President Chakwera, Saulus Chilima. So I could sit an hour with this one, an hour with that one, and then with those that were just under them.
Although having been aligned to the president at the time, she's the one who was able to speak to the vice president and speak to the president, and then they came together.
And we won. We should be a country that follows the rule of law. And this is an example of that. And everybody needs to be able to comply with what the court says. Now they have nowhere to go. As far as this is concerned, we must proceed with the preparations for elections.
Yeah.
I'm alive.
Yes. Court says they should comply, they should comply. They are not above the law. That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
So we won in court, but we still had to go to the vote.
The problem now was who was going to lead. And, I always feel that it is prayer first. But there are so many Malawians of goodwill who also helped.
Eventually, we had one decided to be president, the other running mate, and here we are.
So finally, when they decided, when Saulus said yes, the young one said yes, I'll be number 2. We had to have a public event to witness that. So I'm the one who signed, on behalf of President Chakwera, that commitment publicly at a stadium with thousands and thousands of people.
Alliance imene njofunika kuti izindikirike na Malawi wonse kulikonseko. Izi lufunira kuti Amalawi nzeru zathu zonse ndi mphamvu zathu tiyike pamodzi tisinthe dziko lino anthu alira nthawi yayitali chifukwa chifuniro cha Malawi chipambane.
And then after the court had ordered a fresh election, COVID-19 came back, and it almost became something that would never happen. Malawians would not have none of that. And so when everybody was afraid that we can't oversee such elections, we can't do this, and all of the year we had been concerned about an electoral commission whose chair and the rest of them had been deemed incompetent by the courts and parliament. But a new commission came into place, a new chair came into place, and in 3 weeks she was able to deliver an election. And everybody says, wow.
What I see is that it shall work. It shall work. From what I saw yesterday and from what I heard from them, because we had a meeting before our meeting, before we went into the public meeting yesterday of the 100 days celebration, and listening to both of them, we are fine as a nation.
Events that led to my being elected president have been such that Malawi's profile worldwide is way up there in terms of the strength and independence of our institutions. When you talk about the court, when you talk about the electoral commission, when you talk about the resolve and the resilience of the people to say, we want a democracy that works for us. We were able to hold elections without any international observer. And they were done in a way that says, what have we been doing in the past when we have had all of these observers and then people are not even happy about the turnout of that election? There is peace, people are satisfied, people across the continent are excited, people across the world are excited, but we cannot live on that because that is but a beginning. So, it's God and the Malawian people.
Unbelievable.
Malawians are amazing.
They are amazing.
Africa is amazing.
You know, I said this was my last question, but this is actually the real last question.
Well, you're like the Apostle Paul, you know, who had finally several times.
Okay, so I am surrounded by a bunch of billionaires, but everybody's talking about ease of doing business. Do you have any policy in the works to encourage foreign businesses to come here? Not just to come and rid Malawi of, but to actually invest here and have Malawians work and then also produce benefits for themselves.
That's right. And I have been talking to investors. I have been assuring them. I have people in our offices who are bureaucrats, and I have said we must cut out the red tape. We must have in our one-stop border posts across the country facilities that will enable people to come in with ease, and then when they register for business, to be able for us to have them registered within the shortest period of time. 39 days is way too long. We are aware of that, and wherever policies need to change, we are working on changing all of that. We want Malawi to be a place where people can have a win-win situation. We are looking for investors who will partner with Malawians, who will partner with government, investors that will put their money here, but will also keep reinvesting in this country so that we can provide jobs for our workers, for our people. We want those who come to partner with these who are already here so that the private sector expands in every way. And when that expands, the people will not be looking to government as the sole provider of employment. They will then have all of these avenues of making and creating wealth. Fellow Malawians and those of you in diaspora, the manner in which I operate infuriates so many people. I can understand how they feel I am moving too slow, but I can assure you, the story is not over until it is over. I can assure you that what promises we have made, we will fulfill these promises. Not everything can be done in 100 days. And I know that people everywhere have cried out, they want jobs. And those jobs, they feel like, oh, he's moving too slow. They want food. Oh, he's moving too slow. They want prosperity. Oh, no, we can't even have funds for business. Let's keep faith. If you sow in faith, we must also cultivate and nurture and water that which we desire to achieve and to harvest. And so let's do it. It's going to happen. We will harvest in due season if we faint not. God bless you.
So, what are your final thoughts on your entire experience in Malawi?
Malawi is the gentle giant of Africa. I am telling you the gospel truth. We've always been all over the place with this whole idea of Nigeria as the giant of Africa.
Yeah.
But I believe that what makes you a giant is the strength and independence of your institutions. I saw a country where the institutions are so strong and so independent. I'd never seen anything like that in any African country I've ever visited. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, if you remember, we profiled the Malawian Defense Force in this very documentary. And you saw how independent these guys actually are. You can imagine a situation where a president had died in office. The vice president constitutionally was supposed to take over from the president. And the guys with the president clique refused to let the vice president take over. And they actually were soliciting the help of the military to make that happen, to subvert that. And the military said, no, you can't do that. The Constitution says that when a president dies, the vice should take over. And they stood by the vice, and the vice took over. Now, again, another thing happened again when the Malawian people thought that the incumbent was not serving their interest anymore. And they wanted him out. So they started protesting. And of course, you know what happens under normal circumstances, especially if you're coming from Nigeria. Mm-hmm. The police and all kinds of security agents will be unleashed on the protesters and stuff like that. But that didn't happen. The military of Malawi stood by the protesters. Protests happened for almost an entire year. They stood by them. Even when the police, was unleashed on the people to go and harass them, the military came to the police and said, do you not understand that they have constitutional right to protest? You're not supposed to do that. And the military was there with the people, giving them protection until they were done with the entire protest. That is amazing. And then you talk about the courts. There was this one that just happened in 2019, okay? A president had been in power for 1 year, but it turned out that he had rigged himself into power. And the courts were able to actually cancel that election after 1 year in office and ordered for a re-election, which now produced the current president that we have in Malawi today. That shows you how independent the courts are from the influence, overbearing influence from the executive. So when I left Malawi, I left there with a heavy heart and also with a heart full of joy at the same time. Happy that this is a country in Africa, but heavy heart because I come from a place where these things are like a far cry. You would never even imagine seeing such a thing happening in Nigeria. Look at what happened even with the NSAS protests and all the accusations on the military using live ammunition on protesters, innocent, harmless protesters. So I believe that Malawi is the true giant of Africa, a gentle giant of Africa, and there's so much about Malawi that needs to be replicated in other parts of Africa. Africa needs to learn from Malawi. If we can have Malawi replicated in other parts of Africa, we would not need to be traveling to any other country in the Western world. Those are my thoughts.